Hello, student. This is the presentation 10, Developing Sustainable Materials Management Community Plans. This is sort of our capstone presentation for the semester. And uh, here's where we tie everything all together. All right. Thank you very much, and we'll press on. Really, to start the process of looking at how to develop plans for communities, it's not an easy task, and a lot of times there's a lot of different issues, a lot of different moving parts. So you have to kind of understand where everything is if you intend to work and work towards development of a sustainable materials management community. First of all, uh, let's look at communities. Uh, for the for the purposes of our class, communities obviously can be many different things. They can be a business community, it could be a religious community, it could be a social community. But for our purposes, we're focused on municipalities. That's cities, townships, and counties, because in California and to a lesser extent in many other areas of this country as well as around the world, um, municipalities have solid waste management responsibility. Now, solid waste management is a approach to how do you deal with, materials. So take that with a little bit of grain of salt there. But municipalities do have this responsibility, and California is directed by Cal Recycle, which represents the state, of course, but there are certain overview roles by other governments. Cal EPA, where actually the Cal Recycle is located, Cal EPA has some jurisdictional responsibilities, and they also have other departments within that agency, which include the Air Resources Board, the Department of Toxic Substances Control, the Water Resources Control Board. So these four entities, including Cal EPA, have ostensibly very specific roles. Sometimes it's in permitting, sometimes it's in the management of particular substances, like DTSC, the Department of Toxic Substances Control, has jurisdiction over toxic substances. There's also the Natural Resources Agency, which includes the Coastal Commission and the Energy Commission. And obviously, if you want to do anything in a coastal area, and coastline is very important in California, you got to deal with the Coastal Commission. And then finally, there's also Cal OSHA, and that's the Occupational Safety and Health Administration. And California has its own version of what happens across the country with OSHA, and they call that, of course, Cal OSHA. And so workers are protected in California by that agency. And so if you're working within this field, then there are a variety of things that must be addressed or are important. SWEEP, which is a developing national standard in solid waste environmental excellence, likewise focuses on local government. And SWEEP I've included in the document, insofar as when you download this document, you can click on SWEEP and it'll take you to the location online to see this new developing standard, of which I am a board of director, or director of the board of the organization. The interesting fact is that relatively few of the 38,917 municipalities, according to the U.S. Census, that number of municipalities, cities, townships, and counties, have much to say about solid waste, since many do not, quote unquote, control waste generation. Even in California, where franchising reigns, it's just usually who collects it. And even then, a lot of communities don't even have any control over commercial waste, industrial waste. They may have some control because maybe they provide the municipal service for residents, but not much beyond that. Industry, in the absence of responsible product life cycle accounting, therefore has placed a management burden on municipalities, and of course that's a two-edged sword for industry, because if you put that responsibility on cities to handle your debris of business, well, you're going to get what you're going to get. And so communities can take action. And sometimes that can be action like banning products and stuff because they present a clear and present danger to community health or environment or things of that nature. So industry has to be very, very careful by not looking at, you might say, life cycle accounting. So grassroots is really where it ends, like stuff rolls downhill. So why not start there at the local level? SMM is really a paradigm in planning, and got a picture here. 1990, we threw away 75%. In 2020, we still throw away 75%. And in 2050, maybe burn and bury is banned. But to kind of put this all into context, for many years, government has viewed waste from the perspective of sanitation theory. In other words, some traditional waste hierarchy that, oh yeah, you can maybe reduce and reuse, and those are just kind of like nice things to do, recycling. Oh, you're never going to do more than 2%, I was told in 1974, and yet we're talking about zero waste today. And composting, well, my gosh, we're only got enough capacity for basically 3 million tons a year in California alone. So there's still a lot of reliance on waste to energy and landfilling as that foundation, even if that foundation, has been kind of inverted, of which this is this inverted pyramid. Most communities have taken a step in the right direction by reversing this, but still the prevailing theory in 2020 still calls it waste management. New waste management paradigm, it says in that inverted pyramid. It's still called waste management. And it should be resource management, not waste management. So the new theory is zero waste, although I think it could be called sustainable materials management, and that's on the right, the modified inverted pyramid, in which some things are absolutely unacceptable. Incineration, waste to energy, and really stabilized landfilling. I think it's long-term storage is where we're going to be headed. But obviously the most important things are rethinking, redesigning, reducing, reusing, and then if anything's left over, we'll recycle and compost and such. And that's where RICO, for example, has done a really remarkable job, because recycling is the last thing. That's treatment. That assumes or basically says that we've lost the struggle. We got to find a way to recycle something that is a residual. And if we're doing a really good job of zero waste, we shouldn't have any of these residuals. They should be designed out at the beginning, or there should be some mechanism for take back and reuse and such. So if we want to change things, really, where do we start? You can always start with yourself, ourselves. Oneself has tremendous application and opportunity. And I've stated at the very beginning of the class that every pound is worth 70 pounds upstream. So if we make a decision to throw something away, we've thrown away 70 times on average. So we do have a tremendous impact, even as individuals. But if we really want to make change occur systemically in society, not just one by one, but systemically, we got to know the community, and knowing the community is absolutely critical. So I'm going to talk here in a couple of different slides about, you might say, the politic of it. And part of this understanding the community and the current situation is you got to know the lay of the land. You know, anytime you want to do anything, you got to send a scout, you got to send a spy, you got to assess what's going on. You know, industrial espionage is always finding out what your competitors are doing. But here we're not talking about, trying to spy on anything, but rather find ways that we can piggyback or introduce zero waste at many different levels in our society. And there are a number of ways that we can do this. And I've listed these under the third bullet. One, for example, is the refuse contractual process. When we uh, take on a new hauler, or we want to switch from a hauler, or we even want to just, re-up with a hauler, for example, there's a contractual process, and we've talked about that already. That's an opportunity in which we can instill zero waste into the equation. So that's an opportunity. Uh, Sometimes we don't have a choice. There's a compliance order, and we have to do what we're told, whether it's state or some other mechanism, a state compliance order. We're going to have to take a look at what it is and how we can best comply with whatever that order may be. There can be eco issues that may be existing extant out there. For example, litter. And years ago, litter was becoming such a major issue that even industry got into it and started promoting recycling as a way to control litter. Of course, they saw it as a way to avoid having, return programs and forced, deposits and things of that nature on products. Maybe we're getting to the point where, there's a lot of issues related to litter, and it's not just an unsightly issue, as you well know now. It's a lot more than that. There's economy and jobs. Um, just having the opportunity to build and create the circular economy presents opportunity to build zero waste within a community. And we already know that the number of jobs dramatically increases. One job for 10,000 tons on throwing it away, and maybe 10 jobs for the same 10,000 tons if we recycle it. And if we reuse it and repair, my gosh, we might have 200 jobs for the same 10,000 tons. So it's all about economy and jobs. And now that's something that doesn't matter what political persuasion that you're from, everybody needs a job, and they want to have an opportunity to grow, to protect their family, to make their way in life, and so the three R's become a really neat mechanism, and zero waste becomes a very critical component of improving our environment, and that's why the circular economy is so important. Brownfields. And we may not have talked a lot about brownfields, but brownfields are abandoned properties. We call them brownfield because no one's watered them, and as a consequence, everything dies. Well, it doesn't always die because there's no water, because maybe there's heavy rainfall, but still the ground is brown. Why is that? Maybe it's because the toxic substances that are under the ground and the plants can't grow, because they're dying. And that means we as people can see that as a distressed environment, and maybe there's a impact on us. So brownfields, of which there are 500,000 of them in the United States, represent an opportunity to build or piggyback zero waste. Health issues, yeah, that's like I'm saying with these issues of brownfields and plastics, plastics in the environment. We just don't know what the impacts of plasticizing ourselves are, becoming plastic people. We know that animals are showing up with amazing amounts of really alarming amounts of plastic in their bodies, and now people are too, and we see a lot of other chemicals. So zero waste is all about like removing those types of things and decreasing this exposure to potentially toxic materials and toxic substances, and also things that we don't have a handle on, that we don't know. And remember, the precaution and prevention theory is, principle is that we want to try to avoid situations in which there are potential, um, severe human health and environmental problems. Elections are great opportunities because everybody wants to promise everything at the election time, so take advantage of it. Regulations, sometimes those are opportunities, to help build a business, for example, to take advantage of new regulations. People did that when electronics had a fee placed on them. A lot of businesses jumped right into it and said, "Hey, I can collect that stuff and get paid for it." So there's opportunities, that present themselves with regulatory developments. Siting facilities. Someone wants to site a transfer station or a MRF. Well, that's an opportunity for a community to say, if you want to do that, we want jobs, we want environmental justice, we want opportunities for local recycling, practices and potential businesses, to be developed. Even, for example, setting up a eco-industrial park around a future transfer station, MRF. So those are, again, opportunities. Events, every event in California that has more than a couple hundred people, I mean, my gosh, you got to be thinking zero waste. So events can become a factor to introduce zero waste. And of course, new businesses. And I just mentioned earlier about eco-industrial parks. We're going to grow a lot of things in this country. We're going to reindustrialize this nation because we don't want to send businesses overseas anymore. We're too afraid that we're going to get COVID from them. So that means we're going to have to build businesses in this country. And what better way to build businesses than not depend upon multinational corporations, but to depend upon ourselves to set up worker-owned cooperatives. And we'll talk a little bit about that as well. As part of this community politic, it's all about organization. And that's something I learned from school and some of my other activities at an early age was understanding constituencies and knowing how to organize, developing community and neighborhood relationships that unite broad sectors. And not all sectors necessarily have to agree. Everybody can agree about economy and jobs. Okay, if they can, let's get everybody talking on the same page. And I did that in Diamond Bar, and I've done that in other areas, and we can learn from those types of activities and identify ways that we can work uniting and developing relationships that help us to build zero waste in our communities. But some of the broad sectors are labor, environment, institutions, political parties, health issues, youth, education, educators, green business, and green businesses. I mean, my gosh, there are a lot of businesses that want to do the right thing. They're looking for support. They're looking for ways that they can improve their business. If they're doing the right thing, why aren't we as consumers supporting them? Okay, that's at the simplest level is a great way to help build zero waste. If we patronize businesses because they do the right thing, they use non-toxic materials, they take things back, they provide recycling opportunity, they give us clean and safe products, why not support them? Even if it costs a little bit more, especially if they're local businesses, people who live in our community, that work in our community, that own in our community, that hire local people. All of that can all work together. And that's all part of this wrangling of champions and supporters. We don't need 100% of everybody. All we need is just a committed 20%, and we can make the change happen. Now, if you really wanted to develop something and you say you got a community you want to work with, I've made a very good business in terms of working with communities and helping communities to develop programs and find common ground to build zero waste goals, policies, and plans. But one thing I do want to say right at the beginning is that you got to do with enthusiasm. It can't be like, oh yeah, we got to build zero waste. Oh my gosh, come on everybody, we got to build it. No, you want to get everybody enthused. You want to tell them like, this is the way to go. We got an opportunity to make a change, and we can build more wealth for our community. We can do so much more. You got to build the enthusiasm, as Emerson once said. Nothing great was ever achieved without enthusiasm. So when we do that, always be thinking that. Okay? Always be thinking enthusiasm. And really it's really a form of closing. Always be closing. ABC. Always be closing. Okay? That's enthusiastic. You got something to sell, you're gonna make the sale. Okay? So as part of that, think about establishing formal or informal groups. Find other folks that feel the same as you. If you try to do it yourself, maybe other people will join you, but it's so much easier if you can find other people that have interest. And they can be at a lot of different levels of society. It can be business owners, it can be labor organizers, it can be church people, it can be, you know, a nonprofit organization, it could be a neighborhood group, so you got to find your uh, other folks that are going to that feel the same way as you do, because there's safety in numbers, right? And then once you have a group, you got to prepare a draft plan and a timetable. And I'm assuming you're going to start from scratch, that you don't have anybody else. You get a group together and you figure out like, here's what we want to do. What is it that we want to accomplish, and when do we want to do it by? When do we want it, and what do we want, and when do we want it by? Okay. And once you got some ideas of those things, well, then you need some support, funding support, because in this society you need money, okay, for a lot of different things until we change where it's a barter system, or people do things for free for each other just because we got to survive, you know. People are they're gonna ask, they're gonna get their hand out, and they're gonna ask for something in exchange, because that's our society, that's our system. And it doesn't matter, socialist or capitalist, it's all kind of the same at this juncture. Okay. Okay. So when you are looking for funding support, you can look where local businesses, for example, or you can actually look for grants, as we discussed in a prior presentation. And you can also approach the municipality. And if you approach the municipality, one great way to get started is find a champion on your council. Or if it's not a council, a supervisor. Find a champion at that level, obtain their support, because with that, you can get municipal buy-in. And those folks are looking for broad-based support. So if you can represent a group or a series of groups all come to a member of, like, a council member, like the municipality, you're going to get an audience, and they're going to listen because you represent constituents. You represent votes. Fish don't vote. Businesses don't vote, but people vote. And so local residents vote. So that's a really important way to get that support, and then to help get the municipal management to buy in. Because managers, you can go talk to them, but if the council's not telling them, like, think about this or talk to these people, they're going to be too busy, or they got other squeaking wheels that they have to grease. No, you get a council member that talks to the city manager and says, I want you to meet with these people. City manager gives you a call, says, I've been told I need to talk with you. I tell you, that's a great feeling when that happens, so that's what you want to try to do. And just remember though, if there's something to remember about government, governments always want to be the first to be second. Everybody hates to be number one because governments aren't necessarily leaders. And you go right up the ranks of government. I mean, president on down, they all look at the polls. They want to see, is this going to be good for me or bad for me? I mean, give me a break. Leadership? Nah, that's why I say leadership starts at the grassroots level. You got to build leadership and you got to build enthusiasm and build a momentum and a movement. Okay, so that's real important. And part of that movement is finding common ground to build a zero waste goal, policy, and plan. And these days it's becoming a lot easier to build that kind of support, because folks are worried. They're worried. What's happening with my health? What's happening with the economy? What's happening with the environment? What about global warming? All these things are opportunities. These problems represent opportunities to help us change. And we as organizers and as business leaders and as activists and as folks that want to see change, change agents, that's what we got to find. So focus on the economy, the jobs, health, the quality of environment for all, not just for the few, but for all, equal justice. Okay, get out there and let's start pulling things our way. So let's say that you got an ear, you got an audience, you got an opportunity to go talk to people, at council or local community level. You want to tell them about, and if they don't have a zero waste, or a sustainable management, sustainable materials management, plan or policy or goal, anything of that nature. Well, you want to give them a very easy, uh, you might say, vision, okay? Because it's all about vision thing, okay? And the more complicated you make it, the harder it is for people to buy into it. Make it easy, they can buy into stuff. And what's more easier than a three-step program, right? Goal, policy, plan. This is on your quiz, okay? Goal, policy, and plan. You need to establish a goal with a specific date. I want zero waste by 2050. You need to develop a policy that's reasonable and appropriate that focuses on what kind of infrastructural development of technology and institutions that need to be done in the community. So our policy is going to be, we need to bring together, an action plan. We want to develop, like a series of activities that are going to help us achieve our policy. And typically cities, for example, will develop something that will enable the community to say, this is what we want to try to accomplish. Here's our goal, and here's our date, and our policy is to be a zero waste community and to build jobs and environment is sort of like the detailed vision of what it is. Okay, but just a vision. Okay, it's not a plan. The plan has how are we going to get there? What are the steps we're going to take? What do we got to do in order to get from A to B to C and ultimately to Z for zero waste? What are the challenging tasks and realistic milestones that we can gauge progress? Because like a lot of things, if we say the goal is zero waste in 2050, oh yeah, we did our job, we got our goal, and but if we don't have a plan, you don't have a policy, and then we don't have a plan, a lot of times communities aren't going to do anything about it, because there's no milestones, there's no schedule, there's nothing, so people tend to wait to the last minute, and so folks make decisions on things when they're developing legislation and ordinances and stuff like that, that they put like interim goals and and schedules so that people know that, oh yeah, our goal is by 2050, but by 2030 we got to do this, by 2040 we got to do that, so that it's not just waiting to the last minute to get something done. Sort of like we parcel out the time frame. So the plan of action really needs to have milestones so that we can gauge progress. But another sort of a corollary to this is that, why do I say challenging? If something is too easy, oh yeah, we're going to reach 25% diversion by 2050. Eh, my gosh, that's like falling off a log. I mean, the entire country's at 25%. So that's not challenging. And consequently, if things aren't challenging, when people quote unquote accomplish it, yeah, we accomplished it. There's no sense of community. And I'll tell you about what happened in Diamond Bar later in this presentation, but when things can be challenging, people might say, I don't know if we're going to be able to do this. Can we do this? And then when they do what is seemingly almost impossible, not impossible, but to them it didn't seem like they would be able to do something like that, and then they accomplish it. I tell you, there is community pride. There is a prideful sense of something we did, and as a group, and people can be very proud about it, and they can pat themselves on the back, and there's like pleasantries are exchanged, and people are ready for something even greater. So challenge is absolutely essential to really moving society forward. So we're going to talk first of all about our goal with a specific date. What have other communities done? I have two slides here about SMM communities that have implemented or identified or adopted strategic goals for their community. Minneapolis said that they were going to recycle and compost 50% of its waste by 2020, 80% by 2030. Uh, Oakland, back in 2006, said a goal of implementing a zero waste system by 2020. Of course, doesn't mean that they're going to get to zero waste, because even the goal of zero waste proponents or activists is that it's not a hard and fast rule that you have to be zero waste. You have to be close. You have to be moving towards that, you know. And if you miss the goal, well, you miss it, but you don't stop. You don't stop trying. And that's a very important component of zero waste, is that it's you're only as good as what you did yesterday. You got to keep trying better. You got to keep continuous improvement. Remember that from one of our first presentations, continuous improvement. Washington, D.C., um, they enacted a law to develop a zero waste plan designed to move the District of Columbia toward a goal of 80% waste diversion. Seattle, Washington adopted their zero waste resolution in July 2007. So there's resolutions, there's ordinances, there's a variety of different things that you can do. San Francisco has set a zero waste goal for 2020, and they say they claim an 80% diversion rate, but we know that's not always so true. And in Dallas, they're aiming for 40% diversion by 2020, 60% by 2030, and zero waste by 2040. I think that's pretty remarkable that our Texas friends and folks are coming up with a plan that makes a lot of sense. Austin, Texas, another Texas city, began pushing for zero waste about a decade ago, and they were looking to get to zero waste by 2040. Uh, that's less than 20 years away from now. San Diego said 100% diversion in 25 years, 75% by 2020, 90% in 2035. Well, I tell you, they're not at 75% in 2020, you know. So we'll have to see where they're going. LA plans zero waste by 2025, go hand in hand with its franchise zone plans. Of course, they were at 10% at, one day, and the next day they were at 70%, because they figured out a way that they could get the state to rubber stamp their study, which basically found a lot of existing recycling, and they didn't change anything. So it seemed to them that zero waste by 2025 is going to be fairly easy. And it's not so easy. And a lot of the haulers that have these zero waste franchises are really complaining and saying, you don't give us any support, you don't help us with the community and the businesses. Um, where where is the camaraderie here? Where is it that we're working together? So there's a few, you know, you might say fractures in the overall solid zero waste plan for the city of LA, because folks are having severe problems in trying to achieve it. New York, they're planning to eliminate waste to landfills and reducing waste disposal overall by 90% relative to their 2005 levels by 2030. And one city that I'm very proud of, Diamond Bar, reduced its waste from 65,000 tons per year to less than 30,000 tons per year, diverting 70% and implemented more programs than any of the above cities. Not one of the above cities that we have identified has reduced their overall wasting. They're still disposing the same amount or more than they were, before they started. And I was really proud of Diamond Bar, by to do this because they actually did the work, and the people of the community did the work. And we'll talk more about Diamond Bar later. Well, how can you develop a goal? You can do a proclamation, like a resolution. This is a resolution, for example, proclamation. The community of blank finds the following. We need to do the following things. And as a consequence, we're resolved that our community hereby adopts a zero waste goal and directs staff to return with specific policies and a plan to to implement that goal by such and such date. So it can be a nice little proclamation like that. For example, this is something that the city council in Atlanta used for one thing, but communities have done this for zero waste. And I'm sure that Berkeley has one. I just didn't have a picture of it. Okay, so you got a goal. What are the policies that can work for you? Let's take a look at some of these. It's not a lot of, brain surgery, rocket science here. Sometimes it can be easy as scrolling something on a wall, it seems like, get, build awareness. I mean, this builds awareness, right? And with awareness and more education, you can actually get to the point where people are taking action. Okay, but some of the things that can be done in terms of policies is like procurement, buying recycled, for example, or buying things in a way that focus on design or redesign of stuff. Less waste, no things that have to be disposed or recycled. Like, for example, RICO started working as a policy matter with procurement policy with their suppliers and asked their suppliers to reduce packaging. They didn't want recyclable packaging. We want returnable packaging. If you want to sell to us, you're going to devise returnable packaging. But how do we do that? Well, let's tell you. We'll work with you. We'll give you a year. And so that's what RICO did. They worked with them and developed returnable packaging. And my gosh, all of a sudden, those businesses that are upstream of the upstream company Rico, became zero waste too. And so there's a opportunity for a business to actually affect change in its industry. Okay. So procurement can be a very powerful inducement. And in fact, state of California just enacted legislation that by 2035, I think it is, we're going to have 50% recycled content in our plastic containers. Oh my gosh, it's like, let's not ban the stuff. Let's just make it more recyclable. Oh well. There can be incentives to build local distributed recycling networks like I'm doing in Paramount now. In other words, like we're not going to depend on foreign markets. We're not going to depend on even markets outside of our communities. We're going to find ways that we can turn all this resource into locally derived into, community wealth, community equity. That's part of the equation that I've talked about in terms of circular economy for a community. And circular economy for community can be specifically by a city, but if you look at the metropolitan area for LA, you got 89 different communities there. That's a huge, huge, a huge market, not only in terms of buying stuff, but in terms of supplying stuff. So that's an opportunity for huge circular economy. And we got our own landfills. We got like dozens of transfer stations and MRFs. We got, basically dozens of haulers and we got 1.7 million businesses. We can't take and use all of our materials. Come on. let's let's work it out. Come on, folks, let's work it out. But really, I think one thing that has to be done, it's not like dirty Murphing, like not requiring anybody to do anything. No, it's got to be mandated separation and access to collection. People have to have that. And maybe even community-based gardens. We need to keep our organics in our local communities and grow our own food and things. And speaking of growing things, let's grow our own recycling markets. And we can do that with our own recycling market development zones. There's 40 of them in the state, but they're kind of underutilized. And a lot of communities, you don't have to wait for the state to do something and tell you that you are hereby crowned a recycling market development zone. No, you just do it because cities can do enterprise zones. So you can develop a recycling market enterprise zone in which you can give all kinds of inducements and economic incentives to local businesses that recycle stuff. We can develop economic policies that favor sustainability and worker-owned co-ops. We can even ban organic disposal. I'm sorry, but in our community, stuff cannot be thrown away. Okay? Especially if it's organics. You cannot put that in the trash. Bans on various plastics. I'm working with some community right now, the city of Culver City, on banning a variety of different plastics. We got to have pervasive and comprehensive education and training for total participation. Even though we don't need total participation, everybody's got to be included. We can enable monetization of sustainability. People don't know how to make money doing the right thing because they've been taught now for so long, and there's been such an emphasis on throwing things away that they've forgotten so many things that we used to do. Just, people throw things away. Come on, it's too valuable to throw away. Today, it's like reuse something, it's worthless. Throw it away. So we've kind of flipped the whole thing around. So we're going to have to retrain people to understand that sustainability has its own economic, system as well. And it actually can mean more jobs. It can mean more opportunities and more community wealth. Um, I talk to haulers and I say, you need to stop picking things up. And they go, excuse me, Hulse, but you understand we are a collection company. Yeah, I know you're a collection company, but you need to be a resource company. And to be a resource company means you might not pick something up sometimes. Well, how do we make money? Because you can offer other types of services that basically either switch out instead of collecting, you switch in reuse, you switch in on-site processing so that you don't have to pick things up. And collection is like 70% of the cost of solid waste management anyhow. So if I can eliminate 70% of my cost, uh, why wouldn't I do that? It's just that people haven't figured it out. Okay, there's a lot of figuring out that has to be done, and so that's where all of you as students, that's your opportunity there. It's a problem in terms of, how do we deal with stuff? How do we change from a throwaway society to a non-throwaway society? But that's the opportunity. And that's where a whole host of wonderful ways that we can kind of change things around us and even make money and even make more money than we ever imagined. Just because we're, we're sort of like, we got the blinders on and we can't see. We can't see all the opportunities that are there. A friend of mine, Brick Anthony, who actually was involved as well in the development of the RRM program at here at Santa Monica College, and in fact, he caught this class before I did. He taught it one semester, but it's kind of hard to teach this class when you have to attend, twice a week. So he said, "Hey, hey, Hulse, why don't you take my class? Because I can't do it." And I said, "Well, okay, I'll do it." And so I applied. When he decided he was not going to teach it anymore, the school hired me, and the rest is history. But anyhow, Zero Waste in San Diego, Zero Waste had 6 bold steps, what they perceived to be their strategies and really kind of the activities that they could do, not all the specific things that they would do, but key strategies. In other words, like these are the policies that we want to implement, and then we're going to have to really, work on those, and each one of those things is a very complex issue. Okay, and it's going to take a lot more work. That's the plan. That's your plan. But right now, it's just a policy. They wanted to develop funding strategies that are compliant and sustainable and predictable and incentivize desired behavior, charging for non-disposal services, for example, providing discounted rates for separated recyclable and compostable materials, advocating zero waste policies like extended producer responsibility and implementing regulatory initiatives, things that are going to you might say, imbue the ethic of sustainability broadly throughout society. Again, not the specific things that have to be done, but um, specific things, yes, but not all the details. The devil is in the details. All right. So, how do you develop these types of policies? Well, that's a much bigger question, but at least we'll raise the flag, and here's our flag, and we're going to wave it around, and this is what we're going to do, people. Now, where do we go? What's the exact steps? When's it going to be done by? Who's got the responsibilities? Where's the money coming from? All those things are that's in the next step in the plan. But right now we're talking about policy. So third would be partnerships. Fourth is education and training. Fifth would be enhancing um, existing collection programs and then implementing new approaches to post-collection processing and such. So all of these types of things are going to lead to zero waste. Okay, so I've stated that there's no details in a policy. Yes, which is true. There's no details in the policy. You got to develop, the very specific things. It's like legislation, for example. The legislation in for recycling, AB 939, in 1989 was we need to have integrated, waste management programs in the state. So the state had to take that once it was passed and signed into law. They had to take that and develop the regulations, which is all the specific code that tells people what to do and by when. Okay, and very similarly, a plan of action is very much that. So we're going to talk about that now. Well, developing a plan is easier said than done. There's there's a lot of work that can go into a plan. In fact, I've actually done fairly well in terms of some of my consulting practice in terms of developing community plans. Um, how much climate change is in your waste bin? Oh, I love that made up sign. That's reuse of cardboard. By the way, respect recycler, don't bury our livelihood. That's right. That's right. Don't bury our livelihood. But in any event, developing a community plan is like any project that you want to do. You got to kind of specify the project. You got to do research and development, and you probably even talk to some people and solicit information, and maybe hold meetings, review and interpret this information, and discuss findings and things, and then make recommendations, and upon approval, make public presentations. You know, so those types of things are pretty standard. So you could use this as sort of an outline of how do you develop a community plan. And I've done this on a couple of different levels. I'll show you one that I did with in the community Dubuque, Iowa, and another, of course, in Diamond Bar. Share that with you to show you that all these things can be done, and they have a very specific purpose and an idea. One, a work plan. You got to have a roadmap. You don't know where you're going. You don't know where you're going to end up. So if you're going to step out there, you got to be very careful, or else something will come by, the river will come by and sweep you away. So you gotta be careful where you put your feet. You don't want to step on anybody's ox. You don't want to gore any ox, to use a terrible, you know terrible allegory, or you know example. I guess the example would be the best. um, but you need a plan, you need a roadmap, and I always like site visits and meeting with people. Either you go to them or you bring them to you, one or the other. So you can hold these meetings, but you need to solicit opinions. And who are the stakeholders? Well, I listed all the stakeholders earlier, like labor and businesses and neighborhood organizations and local institutions like religions and just a whole host of people that exist within a community. And then you hold these meetings with them and you ask them, you listen to what they have to say. What do you think? Do you know what the law says, and get their impressions? And by virtue of that, you can really gain a whole perspective, sort of, the lay of the land, and get everybody's perspective. What's really interesting is that you meet with them a lot of times separately. I like that because then people, sometimes don't want to talk about stuff because they're afraid that someone else is going to listen and take their idea or something. So you say, hey, look, I'm going to talk with you. Here's my, um, you know, maybe even some kind of an agreement that says I'm not going to disclose anything that you say to anybody else, or I will sanitize it for the public if I have to, publish my research and stuff. You're not going to be named, and it's not. I'm going to present it in a way that's sort of generic so that people don't have the specifics, and so you can do a lot of things like that. Um, and by virtue of that, you can protect everybody's interests. But a lot of times, I like meeting with people separately, and that way they're more prone to give you their honest opinions and talk talk about other people and talk about other organizations that you might not get if they were all together, because everybody wants to play kind of nice. Nobody wants to get into a fight in the middle of a public meeting, you know. But once you do get all this information, then you got to like sift through it. Oh my gosh, you got to sift through it and decide what's important, what's not important, what's an issue, what's not an issue, what's what is a critical factor. And I oftentimes I go through analysis in terms of making preliminary recommendations of what I call fatal flaw. If and remember this, okay? Because fatal flaws tell you whether something is doable or not. If if um, if I'm doing something for a community and there's no way that something can be done because of, you know, let's say local practices or local institutions, that can be a fatal flaw, you know. And like if my plan depends upon a river and there's no river within 1,000 miles, that's a fatal flaw, right? So you got to know what are fatal flaws. So you look for these things when you're actually speaking with people and talking with people and making assessments. So when you make a preliminary recommendation, you're not like throwing out something out there that isn't possible. Sometimes you can even bring things up and say, well, this is one thing I thought about. A lot of people said this was something they'd like, but unfortunately, there's no money, there's no river, there's something not there. So I just wanted to let you all know. And that often is a very crucial tactic that you can take, in which if there's folks have you hear some of their opinions and stuff, and their opinions lead to certain inescapable conclusions, but they're not they're not reasonable, they're not feasible, and as a consequence, they have fatal flaws. So you do have to bring that up and let people know, and generally people will respect you for that, because you did at least consider it. As I was saying before, I worked with the community of Dubuque, Iowa, and it was actually with the Solid Waste Authority, and I responded to an RFP, and they loved my proposal so much, but it was $10,000 more than their budget could sustain. They loved it so much that they went back and they added $10,000 so they could hire my team, and that was really great. Isn't that when I bid 60,000, they only had 50,000. I had no idea. And so they still gave it to me, and they went back and actually found the extra 10,000. I thought that was great. Um, but my work plan, which I had put actually into the proposal and then actually implemented, had three phases. There was a site visit phase because I was bringing people from around the country, experts, and these experts would go through site visits and interviews and public meetings to gather all the information from the community, because a lot of times, a lot of people can't ask questions locally, because there's just the politics. But you bring somebody else in, they got nothing, to lose, right? They got nothing to lose. So as a consequence, it's like everybody's looking at that, and so there's impartiality. They're not going to be partial to any particular group. That is sometimes very important, to have. So in our site visit phase, we took a week and came in and did site visits. I had one team that went around, did a landfill audit, did clean dozen audits, agency facilities, went to visit and document, did look at the diversion facilities and visit and document. I had one team that did that. Another team did interviews with public agencies, private sector, nonprofit organizations, community leaders, sometimes by phone, sometimes in meetings. And then after that, that same week, we had public meetings. So we came in on the weekend and immediately started on Saturday. Okay, so we flew in Friday, started on Saturday, continued on Sunday, went through the whole week, and by the end of the week, started having public meetings. I went and did first thing on the Saturday, met with and actually before even we went there, 2 weeks beforehand, we called a lot of people and we arranged a lot of things. So it really starts early on in the process. You know, you figure things out, you create a plan of action, and then when you're there, you implement the plan of action and go through all these things. And I even had, like, on the Saturday that we got there, an article in the newspaper and TV shows and stuff like that, TV news about we're in town, we're here to talk to people, come and tell us your blue sky, we want to hear what you got to say, you know, and it was just great. The response was amazing. So anybody that we didn't know about at the beginning, you know, prior to, and didn't set up a specific meeting with, we were able to find them and contact them the week we were there, and then actually had our public meetings. So we actually began uh, proposing or scheduling meetings later in that week. Actually, we did those schedulings weeks beforehand, and so when we blew into town, we met with a lot of people. We met again with those people in public meetings, and so we got a lot of good information. Then I gathered my team. We flew back to our respective locations, and we started to craft a report, an evaluation, you know, based on on what everybody was thinking, and I gave individual responsibilities, you know, to the team leaders, those who were responsible for site visits, those are responsible for interviews, those for the public meetings, and they start compiling all their information and got me all the information, and then I'm developing the outline of what we're going to write about, and so we collaborated online as best as we could at that time. And this was like, my gosh, uh, 2005, 2007, somewhere, something like that. It was quite some time ago. So it was really a very unique type process to go through. We looked at risks, how we could mitigate risks. We looked at technology, the value added propositions that were out there, the policies that might have to be enacted. And what would be more than policies? What would be ordinances? What's going to become law? What are things that we're faced with, like statewide, you know, that could present limits? What are the fatal flaws? Things of this nature. And that's sort of the risk. And that's when I talk about risk, what are the fatal flaws? The education that would need to be done and how it fits within the overall sustainability goals of the community at large and even of businesses. And based on that, then developed a report and shared that with folks. And we did this like over a month. Okay. And we prepared a preliminary findings and recommendation report, sent that in, discussed that with them. And then after that, this part of the reporting phase, we I went back and made a physical presentation with the community at a large auditorium with a lot of people, and talked with a lot of folks again about what it was. And then based on that, we could accept or reject specific findings and recommendations, and we continued on to the draft report. So it was really a very interesting type of process and development that enabled the community to really get their wishes and and actually some of the things that came out of it were very interesting because this group, the Solid Waste Authority, was actually very afraid of zero waste. They were thinking that we were actually going to get to zero waste and that their landfill would not have any waste. And how were they going to pay for this landfill that they were developing and redeveloping and it had like 30 or 40 years of life, you know? And it was like, that's the easy questions. Excuse me, folks, but you don't have to worry. We're not going to get to zero waste overnight. It's going to take years. And in fact, a lot of the things that I want to do and what we want to do is going to benefit you because we're going to help you develop and identify things that you can do around your landfill, like set up reuse stations and repair and an eco-industrial park around your landfill. You know, you're going to help build the infrastructure right there at your landfill. And it just they were so happy to hear that part that they would have a hand in this, you know. But that's kind of like what happens when people start talking about concepts and the vision thing, and people don't understand what the terminology means. Zero waste. Oh my gosh, we're not going to have any waste. Oh my gosh, we're going to have to close our landfill down. No, no, no. That wasn't going to happen. Well, when you do this kind of analytics and stuff like this, and just like we'll talk a little bit about Paul Connett's zero waste solution, but you know, he doesn't delve into this kind of detail in it, but really there's two parts, and there's another two parts. Okay, so there's all these different parts, moving parts. One is called supply and demand. You got to supply a material, and there's issues related to supply. Okay, what's coming in, what's going out, and so supply, and then you have demand. If you got to supply a material, is there somebody that wants to use it? And that's part of that. That is the circular economy, supply and demand. Um, and that operates for a lot of different parts, or a lot of different reasons and economy. So that's one aspect. And another aspect is you might say the physical. There is the physical and the non-physical. Sort of, and even non-physical things don't mean that they're invisible or something, but they do have a life of their own. And they're kind of like the relationships. There are things and relationships. Sometimes the relationships between things are more important than the things themselves. But in any event, anytime you're looking at trying to develop a solid waste system or a zero waste programming, you got to look at the technological infrastructure. What is the infrastructure that's there? You got to go through this and you got to make sure that parts are there. You got to do an inventory. Okay. What are the sources of waste? Where is this supply? What kind of condition is it in? Where does it go? Who controls it? And I'll tell you a story in a minute about control. But who are the scavengers? Where are the charities? Where are they involved in this? Social service groups, the refuse haulers, the recycling collectors, small dealers, dealer processors, specialist dealers, the composters, the reuse industry and repair, the C&D debris firms, the brokers, the end users. You know, there's all these different entities that all exist, and you know, when I was looking at this in terms of the community of Dubuque, I mean, there was a lot of stuff. Our report was actually quite thick, you know, and it was really difficult to take all of that and to put it into a succinct executive summary that everybody could read and understand, and it made a lot of sense to them. It had just nothing but you know, the meat or vegan meat, you know, whatever the case may be, but everything, the bones and sinews and everything else, the total organism was also there as the backup, you know. But you got to go through these things, and if something's missing in your review of stuff, well, then you know you got to go out and do a little bit more research. But everything should be checked off in terms of like, have I done my homework? Besides the things, there's the relationships between things. And so policies become Very important. Okay. So institutional infrastructure. Who owns things? Is it government or private? What's the legal environment? What are the um, current laws and regulations? How do they compare to an existing zero waste community? When you look on the picture I have to the right there, the linear system, raw materials are extracted, things are produced, people consume, and then they go into disposal. That's our system. To change that overnight, my gosh, it is really difficult because we're not set up for that, for closed loop system. We're just set up for this linear system. And my gosh, people are producing, wasteful things. And so if we stop, doing wasteful things, there's a lot of people aren't going to have a job because they were involved in producing wasteful things. And so that kind of stuff can make it very, very difficult, to get to the closed loop system. Doesn't mean that we can't. It just means that we have to have a plan of action to get us there. And so that's what I was trying to do with Dubuque and with other communities as well. What are the economic arrangements? The rate structures. My gosh, if the rate structure allows people to throw away whatever they want for the same price, even if so that one person that's doing the right thing has to pay the same amount as someone who's throwing away their house every day, that's not equitable. And as a consequence, there's going to be a lot of people going to say, I give up. Why? Why am I breaking my back when my neighbor next door isn't going to do the right thing? Why am I as a business spending more money, making less money, doing the right thing if business down the street doesn't give a hoot and they're just producing a bunch of plastic stuff that they can just throw away and they externalize all their costs on the community and on me. Why am I internalizing when they're not? So these things are very, very crucial. You know, what's the potential funding, the loans, grants that are out there? How can you develop the money that's going to be necessary? And how can you take what you currently have and sort of repurpose our existing collection system so that it's monetized for sustainability rather than disposal? Linear disposal. What are the environmental requirements, the zoning, development restrictions? If I want to do something in a particular community, in a particular neighborhood, but the zoning doesn't allow me to, I'm going to have to make a change in the zoning. So these things are very crucial. The social political landscape. If this is a red community and by gosh, they're coal country and they don't want to see their coal being destroyed, their coal industry destroyed, that's going to present a problem if I want to go to renewable energy, right? So this landscape becomes very, very important. And then who's my potential champions? I want to find out who's there ready to roll up the sleeves and be part of the solution. If you're not part of the solution, you're part of the pollution. So who are my solutionaires out there? My marketeers, my mouseketeers, who's out there ready to work and make things happen? And then what kind of education and training has to go on? Um, what kind of opportunities do I have to work with local community colleges, just like we have here at Santa Monica College, or retraining for the workforce? A lot of times we cannot change what it is um, we might have just because there's no training in place. I can't put someone who's used to driving a forklift and put them in front of a computer and become a computer programmer. No, I got to retrain them or I got to find new work that will exercise their skills. Okay, so that's important. Outreach and awareness. It's like a lot of this stuff, they gotta get the vision thing. They gotta understand what it is and they gotta know where are we going with this. Because if people don't know where they're going, I'm sorry, but they're not going to buy into it. And that was a really crucial part of my work in Diamond Bar and in this community of Dubuque was to get people to buy into this. I wanted it to be their study, to be their report, to be their plan, and that they could own into it. The Solid Waste Authority that owned the landfill that commissioned the study were very afraid that they weren't going to be able to pay for their landfill in the future. I was able to, or our team was able to, uh, to calm them down about that part and say, no, you're going to have all these different opportunities. And so they became aware of what the options were. Labor requirements and restrictions. You got to know how things are going to work with the labor force. What are the issues that are going to come up? Are jobs of really importance? If most of our jobs are in wasteful industries, how are we going to provide for their retraining? How are we going to work with their union to get them to give that up and to go into some other field? And then how's that going to work with potential ownership of new businesses? Are they going to be worker owned, or are they going to be, traditionally, boss employee relationships, and will the investors want to work with the labor force in a very egalitarian way? And then what kind of partnerships are out there? Where is it that we can find ways that we can work with people and make these things, cobble them together? Um, if we can't create the partnerships out there, it's really difficult to have too many moving parts. You really need to reduce the moving parts. That's why, I like electric cars. There's fewer moving parts, right? The combustion engine has got a lot of moving parts. But nonetheless, if you can come up with partnerships between people, then we have an opportunity to help build, that kind of cooperative structure for the community. And just to go back to that other story, I went to uh, I was working in Houston, Texas for a landfill owner. They had a bale fill, and the bale fill, uh, you know, had no business because the bale fill was much more expensive than traditional landfilling. Well, I found um, a transfer station in another part of the country where they made bales, and they said they didn't have any place to put their trash. So I thought, hey, I'll combine them with my client in Texas. I brought my client to New Jersey, it was, and also in Philadelphia. It was a transfer station in New Jersey, and it was the trash from Philadelphia. And so stuff goes across, state lines and city lines and things like that. Well, I was crossing ocean lines, and we were going to barge it because at the time barging was like a huge no-no. And I thought, well, wait a second. That's a great idea because barging from New Jersey to Texas was cheaper than putting it on a train. It was actually very inexpensive, and given that they were charging $73 a ton to basically take material, and my client was like, I don't know, $20 a ton plus 22, 42. 42 is less than 73. Okay, so there was an economic incentive. Everybody was really happy. And so we signed agreements. The city of Philadelphia was all happy to do this as well. And so my client was waiting for the trash to come. And they waited and they waited. And then, boom, in the news, Houston Chronicle, because that's where we were very located. Trash coming from Philadelphia to Houston. And side note, sidebar, transfer station in New Jersey burns down. And I found out that it turned into a huge, huge Donnybrook. I mean, it was like, whoa, oh, whoa, just incredible. But somebody in New Jersey in Bergen County, New Jersey. The capo there said, you're not taking my trash. You're not taking my trash to Houston. It's going to stay. It's going to go to Ohio." As my trash truck comes by my studio here. Speaking of trash, but in any event, it didn't happen, and I can tell you more about it, in class and stuff. But it was quite something else. I think I kept the news article, because it was just a huge event, and trash coming to Houston, and even in Philadelphia there was somebody did a cartoon in which they had a Philadelphia trash can and some other recycling can, and then they had a little can for Houston, so people could put their trash into the Houston can. It was great. Uh, Even though that didn't happen, it got enough notoriety for my client that he was able to sell his landfill. So that was it, it all ended up good, you know. It's just kind of funny. But those are the kind of things that happen. And when did that happen? Oh my gosh, 19 let's see, 1980, 88, I think, 1988, sometime like that. It was great. One of the best parts, I think, of Paul Connett's books, and perhaps he can talk about it as well, is his 10 steps to zero waste community. And in many ways, there's, um, a lot of it is identified in what I do, but definitely he's hit on 9 and actually 10 things very important. One, source separation. It's got to begin with source separation. People got to physically handle material. If you just tell them put it in a can and we'll take care of it, just mix it everything together, trash, recyclables. That's not getting the job done. People don't get educated. They need to educate, physically work with their hands. And I said in our last presentation about education that you know people remember 90% of what they learn when they do something, and that's an important component. Um, One thing he's got here is door-to-door collection. Obviously, his focus is on single-family residences, but even you could say door-to-door for businesses as well. Yeah, everybody's got to participate in this. Composting has got to be an essential component of this, whether it's local or regional facilities, but I think a heavy reliance on local, or not even producing it in the first place. Um, Recycling is part of it. To me, though, it's kind of the last thing to do. But obviously, that's something that is still an important component because recycling will help us transition to the waste prevention society. Reuse, repair, and community center. His idea there is that we need to provide mechanisms like urban ore in which we can bring materials which have a potential for future life so that they can be returned back into the productive sector. Waste reduction initiatives, things in which we either prevent stuff by saying it's banned, no more organics in the landfill. We have to, 50% recycle content, legislation, things of that nature, all these types of things, deposits. And so those are all waste reduction initiatives. And then economic incentives, how can we get people to do the right thing? Um, in some ways, like, and I'll talk about Diamond Bar in a minute, but in the city of Diamond Bar, we encourage people to um, steal a little bit of thunder for myself. We encourage people to recycle by giving them a decrease in their rates. So if they did the right thing, there would be a proportionate decrease in their cost. and so that's an economic incentive. If people are putting things into their pocket, like money, okay, they're going to be apt to do something because not everybody's going to do it because you're going to save Bambi, or you're going to protect the polar bear or the little seal or something. No, they need more demonstrative. How does this help my family? And you remember at the very beginning of the class when I showed you a picture of all the food and everything else that we throw away in our families during the year. That's really money out of people's pocket. And if you can show how they can put that money back into their pocket by reducing and reusing and repair and so forth, then that's part of them taking ownership of it. Residual separation and research. That obviously, you know, uh, kind of like takes a look at how government can perhaps work with industry to devise ways to kind of prevent as much waste as possible. But I also look at it in terms of what Rico did, because they demanded of their suppliers that they become zero waste and give them products that are zero waste, and then they would work with them. So it doesn't have to be a center. It can happen at any juncture along you might say, along the circular economy path, so that residual separation and research can go on anywhere. And that, of course, leads to better industrial design. But a really important thing is landfill has to be temporary. And I think we're at the point where we can see that at the end of the road, it's no more landfill. Oh, I'm sorry. It's an engineered dump. Sanitary landfill, my foot. It's an engineered dump. There were open dumps, and now we have engineered dumps. There's still a dump. A dump by any other name still smells as bad. So his conclusions, we do not need mega landfills or incinerators. Exactly. There is better alternative. There are better alternatives. The zero waste strategy is better for our health because less toxics. Better for the economy, there's more jobs. And it's better for our children, more hope. It's eco-justice. And it's better for the planet, more sustainable. The also EcoCycle out of Boulder, Colorado, came up with a nice little chart showing some of the components of a full cycle system, upstream and downstream, the zero waste economy. And this can sort of be like a template for the kind of things that can happen. Everything upstream has to be addressed, and downstream has to be addressed, and wherever you are, midstream, it all is part of it. Zero waste or darn near. Clean production. More resource efficiency and recoverable, less toxic to workers, environment, and consumers. Retail stores are opportunities for consumer education, product take back. Not only buy stuff and perhaps even lease things, but return things. Consumer has buying power. Create market demand for products that are really good, but also vote with our dollars and don't buy stuff that's wasteful. Product responsibility. Manufacturers are part of the solution, taking back their own products or supporting recovery infrastructure. Resource recovery parks, which I like a lot. Community centers for total recovery, reuse, recycling, composting, material exchange, education. And they're not just some, you know, you know, rose-colored glass type thing looking through at a half full glass and saying it's full. No, these are real opportunities for the circular economy, because I really do think that we're going to have to build more capacity. And where are we going to build it? Well, we should build it where we take our waste right now. And there's 1,200 landfills in the country that could be converted to resource recovery parks. 1,200 resource recovery parks, 52 major metropolitan areas. These are our goals, and that's my goal as a business, is to convert this country to zero waste through reindustrialization. So it's jobs, 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 and changing the rules by removing market barriers and inequities to support sustainable industry. Shifting subsidies. It's like, why should trash disposal get all the money? How about recycling, reduce, and reuse? Now, people should be paid to not generate their waste. So there's a lot of things that we could do. Design for the environment, not the dump. And that's what we're doing now. How to make it more efficient to collect it and take it someplace and hopefully, reconstitute it. That's to me, that's the rose color that our system looks at right now. But again, it's a waste-based system. This is what we want to become, the circular economy system. All right, I've plenty of times teased Diamond Bar out there, so let's talk about Diamond Bar as a development case study for zero waste programs. Now, I've worked with Diamond Bar for about 27 years, kind of unheard of to be a consultant for a city that long. Um, but sort of like midway through my actually the first third of my time with the city. Um, After 1995, the city was not at 25%, and so the goal of AB 939 was 25% by 1995 and 50% by the year 2000. But it was obvious the city wasn't going to make it. It was like around 10% based on numbers provided by the state. So the council was worried that they would get fined or something, get a compliance order and get fined by the state because cities were getting compliance orders and getting fined by the state for not being in line on the 50% coming up, and actually for 25%, and definitely for the 50%, there was a lot of rumblings about that. Well, to the credit of the um, council in Diamond Bar, they elected to involve the community. There, a lot of times I've talked to cities and I've talked to them about let's involve the community, and they're going like, what? And sort of like, we don't do that here. It's not election time, so why are we inviting the public? Um, in any event, the city of Diamond Bar, you know, trusted my advice and went with opportunity here to develop their program in a way, and they definitely bought into the idea that if the community owned it, the community would do it. So they said, we'll go out there and prove it. Okay. I turned around and said, I need you to invite stakeholders from the community. And so the council invited about 70 local stakeholder participants, folks from all over the community, and sat around in a room. Actually, this is smaller, the picture, than the room we had, and the number of people was much greater, about double that. Um, but they invited folks, and two of the electeds said they would sit in. That's the maximum that can sit in a meeting without it being a formal council meeting. So in any event, I said to take 6 months, and so we created this 6-month Blue Ribbon Committee with the local 70 local stakeholder participants, and I organized it based on a third of the time for learning, a third of the time for internal communications, and a third of the time for additional group discussion. So 2/3 of the time would be folks from the community getting to talk and dealing with stuff. And the learning part of it is where I would talk about giving them a complete understanding of AB 939, their community, the standards and best practices, local issues. The city was a kind of a Wild West. There was no hauler specifically, and anybody could hire anybody. So there were issues, and we knew it was going to be very difficult to get just getting the 25%, if let alone 50%. Well, we developed through this process, I think, a very good understanding of what the law entailed, what the technological infrastructure was of the city, what they were missing, what they needed, the institutional structure. Talked about a lot of things that we've talked about in our class. And at the end of the day, I gave them three scenarios, an easy scenario, a moderate, and a difficult scenario. And when I say scenario, I mean it's like, what is the program that you're going to select? Is it going to be easy? We're not going to change anything, keep it the same. Or something moderately difficult in which we're going to change some things and keep some things the same. Or we're going to go a really difficult scenario in which we kind of load up with every program in the book. Things like pay as you throw and taxing ourselves to pay for e-waste and making it mandatory to participate in programs and we're going to select only one or two haulers, to handle this stuff. Well, the committee went through its deliberations over time, and to the surprise of the two council members, they voted unanimously to pick the most difficult scenario. And that was just amazing. They took that back to council. They received the report. They voted to accept it and for staff and the consultant to take it to the community. And additional community participation process ensued, where we went to schools, places of worship, neighborhood and business associations, just you name it. I must have talked to like, I don't know, 3,000, 4,000 people individually over a period of another 6 months. And then we had to go through, then we took that information, brought it back, and council said, this is great. Everybody seems to support it. We don't have any major issues. Anybody in the audience, opposed to it? There was no one with any real opposition. Somebody got confused about what's a recycling bin versus a trash bin because they complained about about businesses not recycling, and they showed a blue bin with a bunch of cardboard in it. And so council says, well, Mr. Halls, can you address this issue? And I said, well, yeah, can we show that picture again? That's a blue bin. That's a recycling bin. And so the cardboard should be in the recycling bin. That's what we're trying to accomplish here. Oh, great. So the council adopted it, and we began a process of selecting a hauler. It took several months to select a hauler, go through that process, and develop a new contract with the selected haulers. And so, like in 2001, I believe, because this was like a 1998-2000 process. In 2001, we actually got the ball rolling and launched the new system for the city. And it was an amazing thing to see all of this stuff happen. Well, for this community plan for Diamond Bar, it really before there was the watchword zero waste plan, it was really kind of a waste minimization plan, but it was just a compliance plan for meeting AB 939. And I used the original study, the source reduction and recycling element, and these are things that were kind of left up to the community to decide what to do. A lot of communities just took it and ran and hired a consultant who designed something in the absence of any kind of conversation with the community. But I just don't like to do stuff like that. I'd rather have the community take ownership of things, and I think this is a really important point. if the community takes ownership, it will do, you might say, the work that needs to be done because they've committed to it. And so Diamond Bar Zero Waste Plan, set up the goal of compliance, 50%. And we said, didn't give it a specific time frame. We just said that within a year or 2 years, we expected to get to 50%, but our goal was that, hey, it was 2000 was the year that we were supposed to achieve this. The state will come around and ask how we did, you know, but we got it started finally in 2001 because it took time for not only the analytics to be done, the initial development, get it approved and get it discussed within the community and get people's buy-in to it. But once we had that, and then we hired the hauler and stuff like that, then we were ready to rock and roll. So PAYT, pay as you throw, with built-in incentives to reduce wasting. For example, like if people backyard composted and they didn't need a green bin, they get a reduction in their monthly rate. You know, ta-da, light bulb going out, people don't like to pay for something if they're not using it. So that was I thought a very innovative type of program. And then we had commercial recycling because it just shouldn't be just the community, but the the residents, but also the multifamily sector and the businesses should participate. We made it illegal to discard recyclables, and by the way, since then it's been rescinded because people recycle like less than 10%, contamination, and they just do a really good job. We installed a household hazardous waste fee, provided free technical assistance to residences and businesses, and people could go to a workshop on composting. We did several of them, and we got hundreds of people to participate. And in fact, a quarter of the city's population was involved in backyard composting, and that's unheard of. I don't think anybody's ever had that in the United States. Oh, you go to France or someplace, where they practice this stuff, but here in the United States, oh my gosh, you know, we're all sort of rebellious here. We don't like to do what government tells us. And in any event, that's why I like this ownership part of it, because the residents are telling themselves, not the government's telling them. And then we did competitive bidding, of course, with 2 haulers that were selected. And we allowed recycling to continue to flourish because we didn't allow the franchisees to kick out any recyclers. Well, the nice thing about it is that diversion went from 10% to 50% in 2001, and it took only 4 months to get there. And it wasn't phony baloney stuff. It was actually material being recycled or reduced. Community costs decreased going from open market to the closed market. They were paying $15, then it was down to 12. And actually the city got US EPA and Cal Recycle awards for best new programs in California and PAYT in 2002 and 2003. And the thing I was really proud about was that it was diversion based on actions, not studies. The US EPA PAYT bulletin, and you can read this for yourself. I included the link for folks, and you can get this off of the PDF. But the report said the program also helped the city decrease waste generation by 4% despite a population increase. And within 4 months of implementation, the city had a 50% diversion rate in the residential sector. That was the entire city. The city made the residents the #1 priority in the planning and implementation process. People will want to and will do the right thing when they are included in the planning process from the beginning. Like, come on, duh. And to promote grass cycling and composting, the city gives a yearly $36 collection discount to residents who did not dispose of yard trimmings and attend a quarterly workshop to receive a free compost container, a compost bin. So we had, like I say, a quarter of the households participating in this particular program, and some of the others did grass cycling, or they did, xeriscaping, so they didn't need a compost container either. So it really was amazing, what went on in this particular community. But it's a testament to show that if you do the right planning, you do the right education, you do the right training and outreach, and you allow people to make decisions for themselves, it can work, and people will develop programs that are phenomenal programs. Oh, the story is beginning in other places too. Um, Story, for example, is beginning in Atlanta, Georgia. One of my former RM students is the senior recycling coordinator for the mayor of Atlanta. Her name is Natasha Dyer. She graduated in 2014. Um, she was in textiles, fashion design, and became so enthusiastic after taking our classes that she became a diehard zero waste proponent. And uh, Consequently, my company established a branch office in Atlanta, and she's part of it. She's loosely affiliated with it. Obviously, she works for the city still, but she's affiliated with it. And also, I have a cohort who's my sustainability advisor, and he used to work with the Department of Toxic Substances Control here in California. His name is Leonard Robinson, and you probably know Leonard from his involvement in our class. Um, Anyhow, through his efforts, we obtained a first contract to provide a sustainability plan for the Atlanta Catholic Archdiocese. That's 1.2 million Catholic households. I think households are, maybe it's, you know, parishioners, but one or the other. It's a million is still a million. It's a lot. And he also developed a sustainability council in the nearby town of Smyrna. And we're in the process of contracting as an MBE with local businesses, haulers, recyclers, and cities. Well, I think one of the things that I'd like to focus on right now is like, what are the opportunities out there, to bring a lot of this stuff together, because it's not just what you can do at a city, it's what you can do at a business as well. So whether it's city or business city, or some combination, because there's a lot of times there's kind of a blurring of lines between what's municipal, what's government, and what's private. I operated, for example, uh, as a public figure, an official of a city, and yet I was a contract employee for the city, a contractor. So sometimes those things, can work in a variety of different ways. Um, but but really to kind of bring this whole thing full circle is like there are, a lot of new developments. I'm really excited about owning the change, building economic democracy, one worker co-op at a time. Wastes are simply resources out of place. And so if we're paying to get rid of stuff that has a value, that doesn't make sense. We can own and control the means of production through sustainable business. A variety of businesses all focused on sustainable materials management. And so we can turn our waste into resources and into jobs and community equity. So be the change we desire with worker-owned cooperatives, and perhaps we start with eco-industrial parks and distributed recycling networks. So that's kind of my pitch for you, and there's opportunities out there. I'm exploring them, and if you have interest in this as well, and you feel you got the game to deal with some of these things, and to be part of a growing concern, please give me a call, send me a note, email, text. I'm interested as well. Thank you very much. I appreciate your attentiveness, your leadership, your participation in this particular class, Zero Waste for Communities, Recycling and Resource Management for Zero Waste Communities. And I hope that you have found this, you know, um, I think both useful for you, a tool in that you learn a variety of different tools for future activities that you might do. Uh, just remember this, every job should be a green job. It's not something new. Every opportunity out there should be converted to a green job. So that's number one. Number two is that there are opportunities out there. They exist, and I'm interested. If you're interested in being part of a team, get in touch with me, definitely. But thanks again very much for all your participation. Okay, don't forget to take the quizzes. There are 10 such quizzes within this class. Each quiz consists of 3 questions. Quizzes will be tabulated by no later than the week ending the semester session. And of course, they represent 60% of your grade. So, please do take the quizzes. I don't want anybody to get less than perfection, especially after spending so much time and effort listening to these and viewing these videos and participating in the class. The questions aren't that difficult. All the answers can be found in the PDF portions of each of the presentations. Okay, thanks again. If you have any questions or comments, please feel free to contact me, send me an email, a note, a text, a phone call. Always interested to hear how you're doing, in fact, as you go beyond the class and you go out into your regular life and maybe in existing jobs. Well, convert those jobs into green jobs. And if you're looking for jobs, you can go out there with the idea that zero waste can help you convert and become an ecopreneur. And perhaps you can bring efficiency and effectiveness to any new employer that you might have or an existing employer. Um, Again, any questions or comments, please contact me. And again, thank you very much.